We're approaching the 3-year anniversary of Ben's passing, and it's been hard for me because we're now getting to a point where we lived more life without him than with him. 26 months and 17 days is a short little life. So when we've had more Christmases without Ben than with him, or where we've celebrated his birthday more without him than with him, in a way, it's almost getting harder. And I don't say that as a discouragement, but more just an admonishment to remind particular believers that you can step in with people at any point in the journey. It's not too late to ask someone, how are you doing?
Hi, you're listening to the Zan Tyler Podcast. Welcome to the Zan Tyler Podcast, where our goal is to encourage you to thrive in the homeschooling journey. Let me take just a minute to encourage you to subscribe to this podcast wherever you watch or listen, including YouTube, and to visit us on social media. I am so excited to have Brandee with us for part 2. If you missed part 1 of this episode, I would really encourage you to go back and listen. Brandee is the mom of 4 boys. They've been homeschooling for over a decade. They own a ranch where they farm and ranch. And I am a non-cowboy trying to explain what she does. But Brandee does a great job in the podcast of describing all of this. You'll be so encouraged in your homeschooling journey to continue to persevere, love your kids, and have this time with them. This podcast is brought to you by BJU Press Homeschool. Homeschooling is an exciting adventure we take with our children. One of the most challenging parts of this journey is choosing the curriculum you want to use. BJU Press Homeschool is a curriculum you can trust. All the books, resources, and videos have been designed with you and your child in mind. Their curriculum is educationally robust and rich, taking into account that children have different learning styles, strengths, and needs. Mom, you are in charge. BJU Press Homeschool is here to come alongside and support you. Do you need help with the teaching load, or is there a subject you just don't want to teach? Their amazing video courses are available for all grades and almost every subject. BJU Press Homeschool believes that homeschooling can produce a new generation of students who know God, love their neighbors, and stand firm in their faith. For more information, go to bjupresshomeschool.com. That's bjupresshomeschool.com. We have spent so much time just sitting around your table laughing. But the one thing that I really love about your family, too, is that you have learned to grieve together. So every family, so I was really naive when I started homeschooling. I just thought I wanted my kids to miss all the things that I felt like were negatives in public school. But some of the things are just life. Right. And they're caused just by circumstances or sin, or it just, we just have a lot to deal with in this world until we get to the new heavens and the new earth. And so, I learned pretty quickly on when we lost a baby at 20 weeks and the boys were 7 and 5 and they were grieving, that we need to teach our kids, how to grieve. And so we not only have fun together, but we have the trials and the grief together. Right. So yesterday, after church, we stopped by, and on your land, you have a beautiful cemetery for Roy's dad, who died in 2021, and your son Benjamin, who died in 2021. Right. So if you feel like it, just tell us a little bit about your journey and what Benjamin's life has meant to y'all, and how, as a family, because I feel like you've really, everybody's got to deal with their own grief. Yes. But I also sense that y'all have really sitting around, all of us sitting yesterday in the little cemetery. It was really obvious to me that y'all were also processing grief as a family. Right, we do, yeah. And grief is such a unique journey. That's one of the things I would always say is each one of our walks in grief and who it was that died, the relationship. One of the things I say in first world America, it's very rare to bury a child. So, we often think that our children are going to bury us. And I kind of think I lived in this bubble that I didn't fear
that my children would ever die. I just did not think that that would be. And part of my story is I lost a sister when I was 14 years old. She was 10 years old at the time. So I almost, like, if there's this, like, crummy Christian checklist of, like, things you have to do in life, I thought I was done, honestly, with hard grief. And I wasn't. And when Ben passed away, he got sick for a week. It was right after the conference where Zan and I met.
Because we saw him
You met
the
Ben.
week before he died.
You did.
Okay.
Yep. Healthy, happy little
Yes,
fella.
yes, so
And both
cute.
he and his younger brother got sick, his older brother, Whately. The two little boys both were sick that week. And in short, Ben died of a brain bleed, but it was about a 26-hour period from when he had his first seizure to when he died. So one of the things for our grief, it was very sudden, it was unexpected and unknown. So there's some people that grieve kind of while people are still living, when they have a terminal diagnosis. But for us, it was just such a shock to our system. And we were, not that you can be prepared, but we were in such shock. And then how each one of us grieved was so different in our journey. I don't like to admit this, but my default mechanism is I get angry. I get so angry at, I just don't want to do it. And Roy was really sad. Jake was mad. He just was biting all of our heads off. And I remember so distinctly after about 4 weeks, I said, honey, you can be mad, but not at us. But you can be mad at God because he is big enough to take it. It is God's sovereignty that is why this is what it is. But you need to bring the fight to God right now because you cannot keep fighting with us. Matt is more of my like mushy, big teddy bear. He's just an oversized Jolly Green Giant type of, like lovable kid.
Yes, these are very tall boys.
But still loves to snuggle. At 14 years old, it's just still his love language is physical touch. And so he needed that. He needed to snuggle in. And Whately was 4. So for a 4-year-old to process this little, this buddy.
Right. One day you have a brother and the next day you don't.
Right. And he was actually down for his nap when we rushed Ben to the ER for the second time that day. And so with Whately, we've learned that he really has a fear of being alone because when he woke up from nap, Mom and Dad and Ben were gone. His older brothers are there waiting for him to wake up. And he's just in utter shock. In the early part of our journey of grief, I literally felt like I was in a pit. And that's when Corrie ten Boom's quote comes just so alive to me, that there's no pit so deep that God is not there also. But I mean, I literally felt like I was in a pit. I could see the light. I knew that the Lord would lift me out of it. But no matter what clawing I did, no matter what I did to strive in my own strength, I wasn't going to get out of that pit on my own. And there's a lot of things I think I would encourage people not to say in a grief journey, actually, than maybe what I could tell people. But for me, I wanted people to ask me about Ben because there was not a physical reason for me to say, Ben, come put your shoes on anymore. There was no need to even say his name.
Yeah.
And I would dare to say that we're so uncomfortable with grief and child loss that we think, let's not talk about it at all.
Because you don't want to bring it up. Before we lost our baby, I was afraid that I would say something that would bring up the grief. But the grief is always there.
It is always there.
It's always there. And so the worst thing is being ignored.
Yes.
I just remember after we went back to the church the first time after losing Joy, there were just some of my dear friends, all ages, older, younger, and they would cross the street while we were walking in not to have to talk to me. And I knew that behavior because I had done that. But then when you're in the middle of grief, you just realize there are some thoughtless things people say, but by and large, it's just so nice when people acknowledge your grief and your loss, regardless of how clumsily it's said, So,
because what we do is we still want to talk about that child. We still want to talk about that life because he matters so much to me still.
Yes.
We're approaching the 3-year anniversary of Ben's passing. And it's been hard for me because we're now getting to a point where we lived more life without him than with him. Mm-hmm. 26 months and 17 days is a short little life. So when we've had more Christmases without Ben than with him, or where we've celebrated his birthday more without him than with him, that, though, in a way, it's almost getting harder. And I don't say that as a discouragement, but more just an admonishment to remind particularly believers that you can step in with people at any point in the journey. We need to learn, particularly as Christians, how to run a marathon and not be such good sprinters.
Yes, that is. I actually do a workshop called 10 Steps for Running the Homeschool Marathon, but it applies to life because as Americans, we want to tackle everything yesterday.
Yes.
And we don't want to wait a year for results. We want it right now. And we're kind of an instant society.
I remember Roy asking me, because the year in which Ben passed away, it really was a catastrophic year. Roy and I took over management of the ranch on January 1st. His dad got sick and was locked away from us for 19 days during the COVID lockdowns before he died.
And you didn't even get to see him when he died. Okay.
At the end of January, Roy and I ran like wild people trying to manage the ranch by ourselves for 5 months. And then Ben passed away. And it was just this year of, it's hard to describe all of the things that we did to try to make it work and keep working still after all of this time. But it was just, it was so different than, I guess, what we thought when we were going to take it. We were so excited. What's wild to me is when we first moved home to the family ranch, we've been here for about 15 years. It was a year I had looked forward to for 12 years. I could not wait for this year in which this transition would happen. And then it became one of the most catastrophic years of my life, really. Well, one of the things I wanted to go back to really quick about sprinters or marathoners is, and related to the ranch, is Roy asked me about 4 months after Ben died. He said, "Honey, I still need help, but everyone's gone. When is it too late? Is there like an expiration date on the coupon of, let me know if you need help?" And I said, "Honey, I don't believe there is. Call those friends that you know will show up." And some of my dearest friends are people that walked into the hard with me in those moments, and some dear friends that walked away, where I just don't have the same relationship because they couldn't do the hard.
Right.
But those that, like, I have one of my dearest friends, it was about time to harvest my garden about 6 weeks afterwards. And I was just exhausted. And I was like, I don't care if I harvest anything. And she said, "Well, what can we do today?" And I said, "Well, let's go pull the cabbage. Let's saute the cabbage so I can get in the freezer and make cabbage pockets." So our friendship began because she was willing to saute cabbage with me for a whole day. And she is one of my dearest friends now, because she just said, "What can we do in this moment today to get you through it?" And that was precious to me. And she's continued to run the marathon with me. It's not too late to ask someone, "How are you doing? Do you want to tell me a story about Ben?" Because we want to, we want to talk. And if they don't, they will also hopefully kindly say, "I don't want to talk about it." And then
Right.
But don't be fearful of adding hurt. What hurts more in my mind is not speaking their name at all.
Yes. Yeah.
We want to talk about them. So I felt bad asking you and Joe. I was like, "Hey, you guys want to go to the cemetery? It's what we do after church," as though it's like Dairy Queen, like, let's just do the next thing. But we wanted to also let you guys see our place in space where we walk through this with our boys.
And while I haven't been here with you physically, I feel like we've kept up.
We have.
Since Ben's death.
Yes.
And journeyed a little bit.
Yes.
Through the grief together.
Absolutely.
And that's been such a privilege. So I just want to stop for a minute here and talk about what I think is one of the great beauties of homeschooling. And that is developing a servant's heart in our children. And one of the greatest things we can do is help them to have the eyes to see the needs of people around them.
Yes.
And so we have a world that is totally categorized by selfishness. When you think of social media and what it means to a child's self-esteem, that's where they're going to find out what their peers are saying about them. And they're nervous. They're being bullied at night, cyberbullying at 2:00 in the morning. And so, kids can't help but just become very self-centered. Where do I stand in the pecking order today?
Yeah.
But when we homeschool, we really have God's scope and sequence chart to love God first and then to love our neighbors as ourselves. So in your homeschooling community or your church or your neighborhood, look around for those people who may be in need. It could be a financial loss of a job or the loss of a child or a spouse or, just little things. There can be little things where people need help. And teach your children to have eyes to see those needs.
Right. Absolutely. One of the things that I would also add to that is, although this has been so hard, I know my boys are more empathetic. I know they're more sympathetic. They see and reach in to hard places that I know I wasn't doing at their age. And I love that because we've had a training ground in which to do that. And the other thing that I've spoken on this a couple times before, but about how to have hope in those hard places and endurance for eternity. And I believe, again, homeschooling allows me that time and opportunity to remind our boys that, there is still hope, even in this hard place, and we can have endurance until we get to eternity.
Yeah, amen. That's right. And it's interesting to me, Brandee, I did a word search for the first time years ago when I was working on that particular workshop about running the marathon. And I never saw in Scripture until then how much perseverance and faith are linked together. Yes. God puts a real premium on persevering. And it really kind of blew my mind. It was very enlightening for me because sometimes I thought, what is the value of just hanging in there? Right. But when God has called you to something or put an obstacle or barrier in your life, for us to embrace it with faith. God puts a premium on our faith. Amen. And our perseverance. And I know that faith is a gift of God, not of works, lest any man should boast. But I really think that, Jesus is always asking, and when I come back to earth, where will I find faith? And he's asking people, where is your faith? Or when he's commending people, it's always for their faith. Yeah. Not always, but largely for their faith in trials and hard circumstances. And so I just think that's really a good word.
And I think we want to be a wellspring. I feel like now the Lord has called me to bless other grieving moms. Nobody signs up for that. Nobody wants to do that.
Right.
But when he brings us through it, if we choose to honor him in it, if we choose to plant our feet firm on the truth of his character, not our circumstances, then we will also be able to have a well within us that really comes from the Lord to say, I know how to love you better in this hard place. He's not going to waste it.
And, there are some ways that your teens especially can be involved in things. This reminded me of a situation with my son, John. I think he was probably 12 or 13, and he found out at church about a single mom who was homeschooling and had two sons, and one was dying from leukemia. Oh, and so John was able to sit with that little boy one day a week until he passed. And this was for several months. Oh. And it was a lifesaver for the mom, but what it did for John. Yeah. And, Ty had another little boy in his life with neuromuscular disease. He was in a wheelchair. It's a homeschool family, but sometimes you just need help. Yes. Outside the home. And he spent a lot of time with this sweet guy who also went to be with the Lord, early in his life. And I always say, I've just seen this as we've worked more and more in the homeschooling community. If you have a child who is depressed or languishing, and I don't know why I've seen this, especially with teen boys, if you can plug them into the right service opportunity, then it really can change their lives. And it just gives them a new outlook on life.
Well, I think we want to lead by example. As homeschooling moms, we want to continue to serve. And that is one of my biggest, the Lord has opened up so many opportunities for me because I've been willing to serve. But then, sometimes you have your little ducklings along the road. So, at the conference, I've served in a lot of different capacities at the state conference here in Colorado. But my boys are always behind the scenes, like hauling books and, moving things in the used curriculum sale. But it's so good for them to see that.
Right, and be a part of it.
Yes.
Absolutely.
They love it.
Yes.
They love the conference as much as I do.
I think it was Matt this morning showing me how people register on not the iPads, but the tablets, and he said, this is how we help with registration and all of that.
They love greeting everyone as they come in. They love doing registration. Oh, you're here. You're so glad you're here.
So, all right. So we've got a few minutes. And so I know it's so interesting, Brandee, because you have this huge ranch that you and your husband manage together.
Correct.
You're homeschooling 3 boys. You've been dealing with the loss of your father and your son. And yet you really haven't quit giving. I mean, I've just been watching since I've been here. Mm-hmm. So you're very involved with the Rocky Mountain Homeschool Conference, which is how we met.
Yes.
And you're very involved with, you have 101 homeschool meetings in your home, introducing families who want to know more about homeschooling to that. I mean, you wrote for a local newspaper on homeschooling and homesteading and ranching. I'm going to say, so there are a lot of things you can do from your home.
Oh, yeah.
To be involved in service and ministry if you're looking for that in your life. And I would say carve out a day or a half a day in your weekly routine and devote it to service. If you don't make it a priority, it won't happen.
Right.
And I would say it's never really very convenient.
No.
We tutored in an inner city ministry in downtown Columbia, the boys and Lizzie and myself with Joe's dad for 6 years. And every Wednesday, we could think of 10 reasons not to go because we had so much to do. But I'm so glad that, by and large, we consistently went. Mm-hmm. So there are a couple other things. You're a doula.
I do help deliver babies.
So how many babies have you helped deliver?
I really should keep better track of that. So in rural Colorado, you wouldn't think there'd be that many, but I would guess between 40 and 50 babies I've helped deliver. Some of them are unassisted births anymore. So it's really just me, the husband, and the mama and the baby. And it's such a precious gift. It came as a springboard. I was not looking for one more thing to do, Zan. Oh, mercy, I was not. But Ben, his birth was a cesarean, and I would call it a cascade of interventions. Absolutely unnecessary cesarean. I'd actually asked Roy to have a home birth with our fourth, and he pulls calves. We do all of this. I'm like, of all the men, I feel like you're really prepared with a home birth. He did not want to do that. Which was okay. So I honored his request in that. But Ben's ended up being a cesarean, and it was traumatic for me. At that point in my life, right. I just felt like they stole him from me. And so Ben and I were actually in the church. Well, I was hiding. I was listening to the service, in one of those like mom's rooms, right?
Yeah,
where
yeah.
You're like, I really want to be in service, but I don't want to deal with crying and sweating and worrying. And, And the Lord laid on my heart the idea of, it's called Hope Knit Together is what I call my birth ministry. And it's just about serving women. So I actually charge nothing on it. I don't, but I just go and I help women have an empowered birth. So we'll talk about it ahead of time. What do you want? Both home and hospital births, but I do show up and help.
Well, this is crazy because I think about Ben Carson says God wastes no knowledge in our lives. And all the anatomy you've had, teaching at the collegiate level, and just all the ways that the Lord has prepared you for some of these different ventures in life you never thought you would be. I
always wanted to be a doctor, actually. That's what I wanted to be when I grew up. And I was like, Roy, I get to deliver babies and I didn't have to go to medical school. This is the best combination of both. So that is something I enjoy. One of the things I want to encourage moms, Zan, is, I saw this on Facebook the other day of a mom who was just in shock that it was going to cost her $2,000 a month to put her child in daycare. And she was only going to make $2,600 a month. Mm-hmm. And I wanted to encourage her that you could capture all of that time with your child, and you could find something where you made $600 a month from home.
Oh, yeah.
When you look at the cost benefit analysis, so to speak, like we could figure out a way for you to do instant cart with the baby, deliver
You're
groceries
right.
to people
Yeah.
that don't want to do their own grocery shopping anymore, which I don't understand. But I go milk my own cow, for Pete's sake. I don't even go to the grocery store hardly. But it is a thing, it's
Right,
a
yeah,
service.
that's right.
And you could officially do that with your child. Just trying to encourage people, or the single mom, how do I homeschool and do this? You can get creative with your time usage, and the Lord will bless and honor that. It will not be wasted. Right. That time we invest in our children, it just won't.
And community. I do have a friend I'm going to be interviewing for the podcast in the not too distant future who was a homeschool mom, a single of 4 boys.
Wow.
Like you. And just the way she was creative, and the Lord met her needs through family and community as well.
Yeah.
And so, I just want to encourage you. You're not alone in your homeschooling journey. Amen. Find your state organization. Find a conference where you can meet people in person, like Brandee and I met. And it's, I didn't need encouragement in my homeschooling journey. I just needed encouragement in life. And so it's just been one of those friendships.
Right.
We still need each other in this virtual age. We need each other.
Oh, mercy do we. Maybe more than ever.
Forever. Yes. Yeah. So is there, that was so great what you just shared about just being creative when you're looking at trying to recap that time at home with your kids. Mm-hmm. Is there anything else you want to share with homeschool moms as we close?
Well, I think the thing that has been most shocking to me is being obedient to homeschooling, to that calling, how many additional doors the Lord has opened. Because I think sometimes if we weren't thinking about homeschooling to begin with, we feel like we're closing this door and what is going to happen with life. But I cannot encourage people enough to consider homeschooling if they've never thought about it before. But man, just jump in, find a local co-op or a support team. I love serving on our leadership team for our local co-op, just to have that, intimate fellowship, regular fellowship, and then looking for that encouragement at the state level and the state conferences. Oh gosh, man, it's a shot in the arm. I mean, It's just a boost of, I can do this again for another year. And I've gotten to a point where I'm serving in a leadership capacity at the state conference. So I'm not so certain it's going to be the same shot in the arm.
Well, you're giving other people a shot in the arm, and you're going to come home and need to take a vacation.
That's exactly it. But again, that obedience 10 years or whatever it was, 12 years ago now, to walk in the door and say, let's check this out, babe, to overseeing the operation of that conference. It's amazing what the Lord has done in that amount of time.
Okay. So I want to thank y'all for being with us today. Thank you, Brandee, for so much. We'll talk about how people can reach you in a minute. But I do want to encourage you, if you're thinking about homeschooling and you need some help, I want to direct you to our BJU Press and Homeworks consultants. You can find them at homeschoolhelp.com/map, and you can find a consultant in your area who will answer questions for you about homeschooling and life, family life, and all types of things, show you how to get our curriculum at the best price. So you don't feel any pressure. Just call and ask them for help. They can put you in the right directions. And I want to thank BJU Press, as always, Homeschool, for being our sponsor and for publishing curriculum that we can trust as Christians and that is so robust and engaging. So, Brandee, as we close, tell us how people can get in touch with you or find you.
The simplest way is just through my website. It's Brandee with 2 E's. Brandee is BRANDEE, and Gillham is GILLHAM as in Mary.com. And then you'll find a whole variety of things that...
Yeah, I think you can find about homeschooling, ranching, leather making, how to start an egg business. So be sure and check Brandee out. And as always, you can find me on social media and at my website, zantyler.com. Thanks for being with us today. We love having this time with you. And may God continue to bless your family. Bye.